Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. We're currently batch recording our upcoming episodes, so I've asked some friends to take care of the podcast in a limited author takeover series. You'll recognize them as former guests on the show, so you'll be in good hands. I look forward to chatting again soon.
Greetings to the multiverse and welcome to Speculative Sandbox. I'm Jacob Devlin, your guest host for today. So, one of my favorite places to celebrate fiction is at comic book conventions, Comic-Cons. It was actually at one of these conventions that I first met Vicky, as well as many of my close friends today. There are a few of us that come together every summer for Phoenix Fan Fusion, and we share a booth to market our books. I ride up from Tucson, another friend drives from California to Vegas, picks up a third friend, and we all meet up in Phoenix to celebrate fiction. Every now and then, the three of us gather up all that we know about pop culture. What endures? What's hot today? What are people talking about? And then we create a cosplay bingo sheet. We pass them out to folks who want to play with us, and it makes a fun game to pass the time while we stand at our booth for a few days. It's fun to see how many costumes we can check off our list. We found that some costumes endure year after year. Harley Quinn, for example, and all the variations of her chaotic counterpart, the Joker. Jack Sparrow, Deadpool, and all the variations of him. Deadpool Jack Sparrow, Cowboy Deadpool, Deadpool dressed as Winnie the Pooh, and so on. There's also a fresh new variety of costumes every year, usually depending on what became popular at the movies or on the streaming services. In 2022, when many of these events started to open up again after the pandemic, we noticed a sharp increase in Loki variants. But let's be honest, Loki was already pretty popular. And then a new frontrunner emerged at the end of the summer, when numerous congoers started to don a sweet denim jacket, some wild curly hair, and a Hellfire Club t-shirt. Even for the most casual fans of Stranger Things, they took one look at the simple outfit and they instantly recognized the character as the lovable misfit, Eddie Munson. So, what have I deduced about fiction and about humanity in 2022? I've come to understand that we love our tricksters, clowns, and comedians. In Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, he identified several archetypal characters that appear repeatedly in the fictional hero's journey. Among them, we have the hero, the mentor, the shadow, the herald, the trickster, and so on. For Campbell, the trickster is often symbolic of our sense of humor. They also tend to challenge the status quo or make the hero reconsider everything they thought they knew before. Consider the Joker. On the surface, he is a clown. Joking around is his thing, even if his sense of humor is pretty dark, sometimes lethal. But on a larger scale, what the Joker really stands for is chaos, anarchy, and disorder, an undoing of everything Batman stands for. Batman and the Joker are two opposites destined to clash over and over again, and this sometimes leads Batman to question his own morality. And no matter how bad things get, he can't bring himself to kill the Joker. Similarly, Marvel fans know that Loki tends to do some pretty horrible things. He's the actual trickster god, almost biologically driven to betray people and cause mischief wherever he goes. Even so, his brother Thor harbors an enduring love for him, and so does the audience. We think he's funny. We feel bad for him sometimes. We put on the horns and a vote for Loki button at Comic-Con. Now, not all tricksters are quite as nefarious as the Lokis and the Jokers. I think we can argue that Eddie Munson is a hero to his core. So are the Weasley twins in the Harry Potter series. There are a lot of tricksters who are on the hero's side, but it's interesting that no matter how dark the trickster can be, we usually embrace them. What's interesting about Joseph Campbell's archetypes is that many of them are echoes of Swiss psychologist Carl Jung's framework for our psyche as well. Aspects of the self that he'd say are all a part of us anyway, and that we just need to learn how to integrate them in healthy ways. In other words, he thinks we're hardwired to be drawn to these archetypes because to some extent, they all live within us. So long before Campbell or Carl Jung, long before Tom Hiddleston put on Loki's cowl, Loki was of course a popular figure in Norse mythology, appearing in Norwegian poetry as early as the 13th century. There's also a treasure trove of tricksters in early European theater. Between the 16th and 18th centuries, Italians turned to a form of entertainment known as commedia dell'arte, or literally comedy of the profession. A lot of this was improvised on stage. Some bits were scripted, but there were a few enduring elements. Most notably for us, there were several archetypal characters, usually masked, and they would appear in just about every show. There was Pantalone, literally means pants, the greedy, crotchety old man. Il Dottore, the doctor, usually sort of a know-it-all. The Innamorati, a perfectly happy, enamored couple. And we also had Arlecchino, the Harlequin. Arlecchino was a low-class servant, and he was usually your typical clown. Tight-fitting, colorful outfit, a goofy hat, and he was known for clever jokes, tricks, and this is also largely thought to be where pantomime started to boom. It probably isn't surprising then that Arlecchino was always the favorite. The audience adored him. A low-class citizen, challenging the status quo, often critiquing the power structures that made him a clown. And on a symbolic level, isn't that something many of us have experienced at some point in our lives? The more I think about it, the more I realize I've never had anything but love for the Tricksters. It's hard to find a Lord of the Rings fan who doesn't love Merry and Pippin, the jovial hobbits that join Frodo and Sam on their journey to Mount Doom. They bring us some fun and levity and a sprawling epic that can feel pretty heavy at times. Not to mention, they normalized having a second breakfast. In a similar vein, the Wheel of Time series, written by Robert Jordan and completed by Brandon Sanderson after Jordan's death, featured no fewer than 2,700 named characters, 148 of which take the narrative point of view at some point in the series. Out of all these characters that I can name, my favorite by far was always Matt Cawthon, one of the central protagonists. So Matt is always described as roguish, with the mischievous twinkle in his eye. At the beginning of the series, Matt discovers that he's a Taviran, a person around whom the Wheel of Time shapes its pattern. In essence, he's kind of a chosen one. Whether he likes it or not, he's destined to influence all the events to come, and he doesn't like that at all. In fact, he spends most of the series trying to fight this. He'd rather drink and gamble and play any trick to avoid the responsibility of his Taviran nature. But everything he does, or doesn't do, actually ends up propelling him to where he's supposed to be anyway, and he kind of just has to go along with that. Over time, he comes to accept his responsibility and take a more active role in his challenges, but not without his continued quips and wisecracks. And like Arlecchino, Matt grows up in the lower class, just a poor boy from the Two Rivers, with a vocal disdain for the nobles. Whether he's questioning authority or the Wheel of Time itself, he is always fighting against the status quo. All these characters, from Harley Quinn to Mary Brandybuck, leave their own individual marks in fiction, while embodying that same core archetype that's endured for centuries. Now, what's interesting is that sometimes the most memorable tricksters tend to straddle the line between multiple archetypes. Maybe this gives them greater depth. As we saw with the Joker, a lot of them also play the shadow, the villain, the mustache twirler. Some tricksters make excellent sidekicks. That's Eddie Munson, a hero to his core, but not the center of Stranger Things. Loki has worn a lot of hats by now, and maybe that's why we know him so well. He makes an excellent shadow, but there's also this redemptive pattern to him. He becomes a sidekick in Thor Ragnarok. He takes center stage as the hero of his own TV show. So how can we continue to complicate the trickster, breathe new life into an old archetype? I think it might be interesting to see more tricksters play the central hero a little more often, or maybe take on a role as the mentor, or the herald, or the guardian. Is it possible for them to be the innocent, a morally pure character who has nothing but the best intentions for everyone around them? That's another rabbit hole entirely. But I don't think the trickster is going away anytime soon. The possibilities to reinvent the trope are still endless, and even when they feel familiar, we tend to fall in love with them anyway. So from a scientific standpoint, Carl Jung's theories are hard to prove. But from a humanist standpoint, I love the idea that there's a little bit of the trickster in all of us. Maybe we're hardwired to root for funny characters, or we admire someone with a little bit of a rebellious streak. Maybe they give us courage to put on the mask and challenge the status quo ourselves. Maybe we're embracing something that's already there, or we wish we had a little more Loki in ourselves. But whether we're at Comic-Con, or watching a movie, playing a video game, reading a great novel, what's more human than turning to fiction and finding ourselves in a character we love? Thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today. You can catch me on another podcast called The Quantum Realm, where we explore the Marvel Cinematic Universe and ponder our modern mythologies. As of today, I have also published 6 fantasy novels, a blend of YA and middle grade, and there are more on the way. If you enjoy twisted fairy tales, check them out. Feel free to give me a follow on Instagram at Jacob Devlin Creates. I'm always happy to chat Marvel, writing, fiction, and of course, Tricksters. Thank you to Vicky for having me today. Everyone, be well.
Speculative Sandbox is a volunteer-run podcast that relies on the collaboration of fellow creators like you. Join the conversation and participate in fun polls and questionnaires on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Interested in being in a future episode? Our DMs are open, or you can email speculativesandbox@gmail.com.